Oh man, it's trade rumor time. Hello guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about a bunch of NHL trade rumors. Now that we have 1 month to go until the NHL trade deadline, there has been so much coming out that we need to talk about surrounding Thatcher Demko, Vladimir Tarasenko, a big potential trade with Alex DeBrincat, and a ton more. So if you want to know the latest NHL trade rumors, this channel is the place to be. So subscribe and watch till the very end for every single trade rumor. So the first thing I want to talk about here is the Thatcher Demko situation. With the Canucks and their spiraling season, we've heard a lot of trade rumors about a bunch of different guys, and we've heard also the availability of Thatcher Demko come into question and also be confirmed later on. Now, with the Canucks, we did see the Andrei Kuzmenko extension, but that doesn't mean the Canucks are going to be not trading at this deadline or in the next year. There's going to be a lot of moves made, and apparently Thatcher Demko might be one of them. Now, in this article by the Hockey Writers, it's talking about the situation and says the Canucks are listening to offers on Thatcher Demko. And Rick Dhaliwal, who's really tapped into the Vancouver Canucks in that market, said on his show, Donnie and Dwally Show, the teams are calling on Demko. He said, if you're moving him, it better be a good haul. He says he wonders if the Pittsburgh Penguins had interest, even though they had no confirmation of it. But Donnie said this sends mixed messages because the team just signed Andrei Kuzmenko to a new deal, which doesn't scream rebuild. He wonders if the Canucks have soured on Demko, and considering, I guess, the injury history, I feel like it is a possibility the Canucks could move on from him. And then we get this expanded upon saying all Dolly and all knows is that the name is out there and that he should be playing the prime years of his career on a team that will have a chance to be competitive. Demko didn't exactly have a great start of the season, and now his injury situation might have the Canucks and other teams concerned. That is the thing, though, when we're talking about Thatcher Demko and the player himself. When he's actually healthy, when he's actually 100%, he's still one of the best goaltenders in the league. But as was mentioned in the Canucks' current situation, does it make more sense to get as many assets as humanly possible for him and maybe even trade for a goalie prospect coming up perhaps? But it'll definitely be interesting to see what the Canucks do if they're going to go full rebuild in that way, which I don't see happening. But even if they do retool, I guess it's a possibility that Thatcher Demko might be one of the players traded alongside Bo Horvat. Now, if you were like me and you were kind of confused why the Penguins of all teams were mentioned in this when they have Tristan Jarry, it is actually pretty interesting because with Jarry and the Penguins, he only has this year left in his contract at $3.5 million. So he could easily go into free agency and make a lot more than what Demko is making right now, probably getting in the $6 million range, if not more than that. And with Thatcher Demko, he's making $5 million for the next 3 seasons after this year. So he's locked up for a while at, if he's healthy at least, a really good AAV. And for the Penguins, that might come into play if they're looking for just pure savings. But again, it does feel like if Demko's going to be traded, it will likely be an offseason deal rather than a trade deadline deal. But this situation is going to be a wild one to keep up with. Next up, though, let's talk about the New Jersey Devils and their search for a top 6 winger. And there's been a ton of interest out there on Timo Meier, on also a couple other players. But let's talk about it here because there's been so many guys named towards the Devils that I think there's just so much smoke in the fire that there's got to be a trade eventually for them. Now, when it comes to this part in the Hockey Writers article, Devils confirm interest in a top 6 winger, and Meier might be the guy. Pierre LeBrun also noted that he spoke with New Jersey Devils general manager Tom Fitzgerald, and it was confirmed that the Devils were looking for a top 6 winger. He wouldn't name anyone, can't because of tampering, but LeBrun believes that the winger is Timo Meier of the San Jose Sharks. Timo Meier would fit exactly what the Devils are looking for. Why? Because Tom Fitzgerald also said that ideally, if he adds a top 6 winger, a player of that caliber, he wants a player that the Devils with the Devils pass this year, not a rental player, someone he can sign, someone he can keep. I think Meier fits that description, and the Devils will certainly investigate that possibility. Now, on that note, there was this later part saying the Devils are interested in Vladimir Tarasenko. During Friday's 32 Thoughts podcast, Elliotte Friedman reported the New Jersey Devils had previously spoken to the St. Louis Blues about winger Vladimir Tarasenko. That dates back to when the Blues were trying to acquire Matthew Tkachuk from the Calgary Flames, and the Blues needed to move salary to make it work. Because Tarasenko wasn't interested in going to Calgary, New Jersey was on the table at the time. It is said the Devils are looking for a top 6 winger, and there has been connections to Timo Meier. Tarasenko might be a nice backup plan that shouldn't require nearly as many assets to acquire, and I think that's definitely what we're going to see here. Even though we might not be the priority, and the injuries over the past couple of years have definitely been a little bit concerning, it looks like for the Devils, their options are tremendous. They have tons of guys available, and they wouldn't be afraid to pull the trigger. And if it isn't Timo Meier, Tarasenko as maybe a scoring threat and also a playmaking threat on that top six as a dual threat guy could be really interesting on top of a forward group that's already pretty solid. But then there's also this next part in another article this morning as well, talking about the New Jersey Devils' interest in Brock Boeser. Speculation has been that the New Jersey Devils will be in a big player for Timo Meier, but David Pagnotta also reports that Brock Boeser might be on their radar. Clearly, the names linked to the Devils confirm they are looking for a top six winger, and most insiders suggest that there'll be a team that lands one of the bigger names. A player with term remaining on the contract is said to be a priority. So this is the thing that's most interesting with what Fitzgerald said, really prioritizing that longevity and that term on the contract for whoever they bring in. With Timo Meier, although he isn't RFA, of course, have that big qualifying offer, and it wouldn't be an automatic thing to be able to re-sign him. With Vladimir Tarasenko as well, he is a rental and doesn't have that term left on his contract. So Brock Boeser is really the only guy that has that locked-in term. Maybe instead it's a Connor Garland as well, but out of the three guys mentioned, Brock Boeser fits that longevity plan, but there also might be a situation where New Jersey wants to go for the cheaper option, and to me, that would be Tarasenko. Now, not cheaper in terms of actual cap hit, making $7.5 million, but I would assume if the Blues are going to trade Tarasenko, they'd be fine willing to retain some salary for half a year. Now, one of the most interesting parts in an article a day ago talked about the Ottawa Senators as well, and here's where we get into the Alex DeBrincat talk, which I found pretty fascinating. This part saying, could the Ottawa Senators be sellers? Despite the fact that they paid a lot of money and took a swing this past offseason to be more competitive, there's talk that the Ottawa Senators might end up being sellers at this year's deadline and could move some fairly significant pieces. More than a few insiders have mentioned the idea of flipping Alex DeBrincat if the Sens continue to struggle, and now there is talk that Cam Talbot, Travis Hamonic, and others could be on the move. Ken Warren of the Ottawa Sun took a closer look at their pending free agents and noticed the Senators might be willing to trade DeBrincat for a good young defenseman. Warren explains that Talbot might be ready to move on. He writes, after pulling himself out of a Wednesday 2-1 win over the New York Islanders with an injury, he won't be back until after the break. Talbot, 35, has a salary cap of $3.657 million, and might still be an insurance option for a team looking to make a long playoff run. Re-signing with the Senators seems less likely than 3 years ago. Now, in terms of goaltending fits, I can imagine maybe the Penguins going after Cam Talbot potentially if Jari, and of course his injury concerns might be a concern still for them come playoff time. And then finally, if the Senators offer a late round pick for Austin Watson, the pending UFA will likely be moved to a contender. Nick Holden could be moved, and Dylan Gambrell likely won't be returning next season. So a bunch of interesting notes, but to me, the most important one there is Alex DeBrincat, and multiple people already possibly floating out there that we could see something like that happen. If I'm the Senators, I would still re-sign him, unless again that DeBrincat flip is an absolutely huge haul. I mean, you traded 7th overall, and even though I think it was still a pretty good trade, all things considered for him, you did trade that 7th overall pick, you traded a 2nd and a 3rd, I believe, and you traded a lot to be able to bring this player on, and he'd be an RFA too, so I still think the Senators would rather keep him and everything, but it also does make sense that they can get a bigger haul somewhere else and possibly get a defenseman like was suggested. But to me, that is a lot of ifs and buts, but if DeBrincat gets a lot of interest, I guess we could see that happen. Now, when talking about young defensemen, I think the only one that kind of comes to mind that's been rumored of is, of course, Jacob Chychrun, but I feel like they've been so in on Chychrun for a long time, and that has kind of come and gone so many times that I think if they were going to trade Alex DeBrincat for him, it probably would have happened already. Now, there were a ton of other rumors as well coming out this weekend. There was this part about Oilers being interested in Nick Bjugstad. Elliotte Friedman suggested during Saturday's 32 Thoughts segment on Hockey Night in Canada that the Edmonton Oilers were one of the many teams interested in right-handed center Nick Bjugstad of the Arizona Coyotes. Bjugstad has 11 goals and 21 points in 50 games, and most of his career since the 2018 season. He's only making $900K and can play in the penalty kill. And even though I think for the Oilers, there could be major moves there, especially on the defense where I think it would be really necessary, I think Nick Bjugstad would be pretty fun to see on that Oilers squad, and I think could chip in quite a bit. It might not be the player they need, but could also bring some glue that could be useful come playoff time. And then as well, this part from Frank Seravalli talking about Bo Horvat going to the Boston Bruins. Per Frank Seravalli, Bo Horvat is on the radar for the Bruins, and they've shown interest in the pending UFA for some time. The thought is Boston is that Horvat could be a long-term option to replace Patrice Bergeron and help with the loss of offense that will come from David Krejci leaving again. Thus, Horvat agreeing to an extension is a priority for the Bruins. Boston Hockey Now's Jimmy Murphy notes a source that has told him the Canucks have always liked Boston Bruins Brandon Carlo and winger Jake DeBrusk. Would the Bruins be willing to put one of those players in a trade with their first-round pick to land Horvat if Horvat is willing to sign a long-term contract? there would undoubtedly be some hesitation from the Bruins to disrupt their team chemistry. So really interesting thoughts there. But with the Bruins losing 3 straight, they've been kind of in a slump for their standards recently. And maybe Bo Horvat is a player they would like to add on, especially as soon as possible, to bring in, again, as much chemistry as they can come playoff time. But it is interesting. Brandon Carlo would be a fascinating player on the Canucks, but to me would also be a player that the Bruins would hate to lose. He's been so effective when he has been healthy, and he's a player that has still played great in the necessary moments. So for the Bruins, it would be a really interesting trade. And again, Jake DeBrusk has also played amazingly, but it would also be one of those situations where, yeah, if they are able to sign him long term, if they are able to bring him in for that term and that contract to be able to still have that center situation in some feasible, structured way in the next coming years when Bergeron and Krejci are gone, it might be worth it to sacrifice those assets to make that happen. But at the same time, it would be a hard decision for the Bruins to make. Now, there's a couple other things I wanted to touch on as well, especially with Dylan Larkin, how that situation has kind of escalated with the Red Wings. With Larkin, if you don't know, he'll be a free agent after this season, and it's been a priority for the Red Wings to be able to get a contract done, but not a lot of progress seemingly has been made. According to Helene St. James of the Detroit Free Press, the Red Wings offered Captain Dylan Larkin an 8-year contract extension worth an AAV of $8 million. St. James figures because the deal was never announced publicly, Larkin has rejected it. She believes the Larkin camp could be seeking something comparable to the 8-year, $73.2 million, $9.15 million AAV signed by Matthew Barzal with the New York Islanders. It's not clear how high the Red Wings are willing to go in an extension, but the trade chatter will certainly pick up if a deal is not finalized in the coming weeks. So really interesting situation there, and I think Barzal's contract with the Islanders is really quite crazy looking back on it. But if I'm Larkin and I'm Larkin's camp, I would absolutely be asking more than that. I mean, you're the captain of this franchise. You've done so much for them and in the past and are still at such a high level in your play. But it would be a really interesting situation for the Red Wings if they're not able to re-sign him, if they somehow goes into free agency for even just a little bit. Having your captain out there like that, I think would be just absolutely embarrassing for Detroit. But we'll see if they can actually get a deal done. There's still a lot of time left, but obviously not the situation the Red Wings would have hoped for. And then one last thing I wanted to touch on was Jake McCabe of the Chicago Blackhawks, who's having a really underrated year for them, and at some points has been their best defenseman in my opinion. We got this tweet from Frank Seravalli. The Leafs, Oilers, and LA Kings have all been linked to Blackhawks defenseman Jake McCabe. So few D with term on their deals have changed hands in recent years. So what is a comparable return? Well, if the Hawks are retaining salary, it will be juicy. And in this article, when it comes to the comparable trade returns, he lists the Rasmus Ristolainen deal as well as the Brady Shea deal, which for teams that are trying to trade for Jake McCabe is, to me, not the greatest news in the world. With the Rasmus Ristolainen deal, it was an NHL player in Robert Haig, though debatably an NHL player, 2021 first round pick and a pretty middling one too, right in the middle of the first round in Isaac Rosen, and a 2023 second round pick. As for the Brady Shea deal, that was 1 first-round pick, which was the Hendrix Lapierre deal. So if you kind of combine those two together, it would probably be like a first-round pick and maybe a third on top of that, which even though I like Jake McCabe a lot, would be a heavy haul for the Chicago Blackhawks and would be easily a deal I'd make if I'm Chicago. He obviously has term left on his deal, I believe 2 more years after this, around the $4 million range. So in terms of pure AAV, and if you want term, he would be, in my opinion, the perfect guy to go after. But as Frank Zerly mentions, that asking price will definitely be a lot. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with Jake McCabe, but I think it is pretty likely it does end up getting traded this trade deadline, and a lot of other players as well that we talked about today. A lot of things are about to go down just a month away from the NHL trade deadline, but we're going to be covering all of that so much on this channel. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that notification bell. Comment down below, what do you guys think of all these trade rumors about the Alex DeBrincat situation, the Tarasenko, the Brock Boeser, the Timo Meier trade rumors with the Devils, as well as the Thatcher Demko stuff as well. So much to talk about. Let me know all your thoughts down below, and of course share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online. Get the trade rumors out to them and get all the news out to them, and click on this card for all of my trade rumor content right in one playlist. My name's Nathan, and you have a great day. I mean, I'll probably have a good day, and I hope you have a great day as well. Have a good one, and goodbye.